Hey everybody, welcome to Retro Station 1989. This is the commander of the Retro Station, Commander Dan, and welcome to our show, License to Play, where we review retro games that are based on licensed properties, movies, TV shows, comic books, superheroes, and sometimes even fast food mascots or breakfast cereal mascots, even if we can find them. Today is our 12th and final episode of our first season, and I gotta tell you, it's been a wild time. I've gone from reviewing things that I've actually really loved to things I've actually really hated. Today is about a very special video game. You might have noticed my clickbait title, but I'm telling you 100% it's the truth. It's the absolute truth. One of my favorite titles for the NES is the title we're going to talk about today. Now, I have to break it down for you, okay? The Retro Station isn't my Retro Station, unfortunately. I'm trapped here. That's right. Out in the Andromeda Galaxy, there's a planet called Planet X, right? And they have a civilization out there. We've been beaming them TV shows, every kind of thing that gets put on a monitor gets beamed out into space, apparently, including video games. Anybody know what the first major video game on the planet was? Yeah, it was Space Invaders. A game about one tank fighting off every alien in the known universe. So, bear that in mind as I tell you Astro Smash, Gorf, Sinistar. In short, it doesn't make us look good. You follow? So here I am now. They call it I'm their guest, but I can't leave until I've done what they've asked me to do, which is to evaluate the military broadcasts. I try to explain to them. In fact, this show is the best way I can show them that these are not military broadcasts at all. They're just games. Some people like and some people don't. The license to play thing is to keep me from losing my fucking mind having to eat turnips every day. By the way, yeah, that The Martian thing, wonderful movie. Loved it. I absolutely did love it because that guy got to eat potatoes. Turnips suck. They just suck. They're the worst. Send a pizza up if you can manage to do it. You know, Elon Musk, work on that. Stop working on whatever you're working on. Get me my pizza, please. Goddamn Noid. I thought I got him, but I didn't. You know that. You can look back on the show and see that. Anyway, but you seem a little bit distraught because this is the last broadcast to my alien underworlds, overlords, underpants people. So, what are we talking about again? Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the game. You might already have an opinion on it. I guarantee you do. You're on the internet right now. You're watching a guy with a bunch of video games behind him reviewing video games from the fucking 80s and 90s. And I'm sure you have an opinion on the game we're going to talk about. Because everyone does. Because everyone knows what the opinion to have is. Let me guess. You hate it, don't you? You hate this game. It's one of my favorite video games for the NES. It is. It absolutely is. It's everything you've heard and more, and I still love this game. As to why, well, the infamous title came out in the late 80s, and my brother and I went to the store like we do all the time. This night we were going to get to rent 2 games and a movie. So we rented My Stepmother as an Alien. That was a piece of garbage. Sorry, Dan Aykroyd, you weren't bad in that movie, but that movie was bad. Then we rented Super Off-Road. Actually, it was Iron Man Ivan Stewart's Off-Road. Super Off-Road is a different game. The Baja, I think they made it for Super Nintendo. Anyway, I love Super Off-Road because I like the sprint games, and there's one called Danny Something's Indie Heat for NES. I don't have that game, but Danny Sullivan, Indie Heat. I don't have that game, but I do like sprint games, so there's that. And then the other game we rented was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And we got them home, and don't get me wrong, Iron Man Ivan Stewart's Off-Road is one of the best games for the NES for 2 players. In fact, it was a 4-player game. But Jekyll and Hyde has something for me because, well, I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm a horror movie guy. My Cannibal Airlines shirt, my Friday the 13th shirt, and
this game here, I love it because it's a horror game. And April is halfway to Halloween. So, buckle up, kids. It's going to be a long episode. Let's talk about the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, my favorite NES game.
Robert Louis Stevenson was a Scottish author of the Gothic horror genre, like Bram Stoker, and one of his most famous tales after Treasure Island was the strange case of Dr. Henry Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Two opposites, a genteel doctor and a monstrous, murderous brute. There's been a stage play, movies, adaptations to comics, and even musicals, starring none other than David, Mr. Baywatch, Knight Rider, and Don't Hassle with the Hasselhoff, of this very tale. Hell, Hyde's been a villain, as seen in Van Helsing, and a misunderstood hero, as seen in the comic League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The character is a famous public domain staple, and has been used in ways comedic, horrific, adventurous, and introspective. From comics to movies to television and stage, the tale has been repeated often. And believe me, I don't take on this particular review lightly. I know that the biggies have all reviewed this particular character's game, and I'll be bucking the trend if I even speak respectfully for it for a second. But guess the fuck what? That's exactly what I'm going to do. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is one of my favorite games for the NES. And it's not because it's a sentimental favorite. It's because it just is. It is one of my favorite games. Let's talk about that.
Attention, Commander. The hosts will be transmitting their decision regarding your employment on the retro station soon.
Right.
The hosts are reviewing entries sent to them from the retro station. I will alert you when they have finished their evaluation.
Thank you, Margot. Jeez. Now, if I've done everything correctly, and I've convinced these guys from Planet X that none of these things are actually military messages, then they're not going to evaporate the Earth, and evaporate me and the retro station, and, well, all of you at home. So there's a lot riding on this review.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, released by Bandai America in April 1989, is a side-scrolling action game based loosely on the novella by Stevenson. The box art is great. Check this out. In North America, they used a live actor for the image on the cover, and it made it to number 4 on IGN's Scariest NES Cover Art list. I just thought it was a badass horror picture. And again, you know me, I love stuff based on other stuff. And there are things that our brothers and sisters overseas in Japan make incredible when viewed through their cultural lens. Let's take a quick look at Spider-Man. Toei and Marvel worked together to create a very cool Japanese version of the Wall Crawler. Their show is a stunt-spectacular Sentai-type show. I mean, look at this amazing live-action wall crawling. And this was in 1978. And it doesn't stop there. Let's take a look at how Japanese culture works with classic tales from the West. I mean, all of the Universal and Hammer monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, they all come together in Vampire Killer for MSX, also known as Castlevania, and Frankenstein for the NES Famicom by Bandai. In fact, Bandai and Toho created a lot of monster and horror games for the NES. Monster Party, Toxic Crusaders, and today's review subject, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But Nintendo gave their spin on Greek mythology with Kid Icarus, and while it's not a valid entry for the series, I'd give Kid Icarus a license to play any day of the week. You want to hear something very weird? Before Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Bandai, there have been 0 adaptations of that property for video games. No text adventures or fun arcade titles, and that would pass as strange until you look at today's title, of course.
Yes, Margot.
Attention, Commander. It seems your hosts are enjoying past transmissions. The hosts seem to be convinced that there's a possibility the military files they've been sent are just games.
All right. Sounds good, I guess. Anything else?
They are awaiting the final transmission from the retro station with great interest. Because if a classic of human literature is actually a hidden military tactic or violent rhetoric against aliens, they will be fully justified in evaporating the Earth.
Holy shit.
I'm going to talk a bit right now about YouTube. I know. We'll get to the review in just a second. I just want to talk about YouTube and gaming critics and creators of content for YouTube, and a sad fact about the place that I've decided to plant a flag and make my way in. We'll start with
the angry video game nerd. He's the 800-pound gorilla in the YouTube room. He's a great granddaddy of video game reviewers. He invented a genre of reviewing that has been copycatted all over the place, and also a character that inspired many folks to take on the overly angry, hyperbolic tone that James Rolfe's filthy, funny, furious critic has. I mean, we've got the Irate gamer. Johnny Millennium is out there, and he had kind of a angry reviewer style, a punk rock reviewer style. Pat the NES Punk wasn't like AVGN, but people mistook his punk for being an angry, edgy character, and Pat Contry seems to be one of the nicest dudes on YouTube. Big shout out to him for helping me with my last video, just for giving me permission to use footage. But the point is, he's been copycatted a lot, all right? For example, his first review of Jekyll and Hyde is much like my Retroflix review of Vicious Lips, which was more a way of me getting a nice gift out to my subs and audience who haven't subscribed yet than a review. It was more a gimmick than a review, in that it's him talking about how terrible Jekyll and Hyde is in drinking, like the low quality of the game drove him to alcoholism. And that kind of started the whole Rolling Rock drinking during the games and kind of established what his character was about, that he's such a nerd that bad games cause him to drink. Most of his early reviews resonated with me because, as a kid, renting games without manuals left me and millions of other players, most of us kids at the time, frustrated and as angry as his character seems to be. He expanded his review of the game and created a parody trailer for the movie version of the game, which are both hilarious. I'll put links in the description below because AVGN doesn't need me to shout him out. Brother knows what he's doing. But then again, as I'm looking, because I wanted to make sure that I'm not going to cover any old ground here, I found out that there are other reviews of this game, and guess what? There's a guy named DX. He does a series called Games I Fucking Hate, which should tell you where the inspiration for the style of his review is coming from, and that's fine. Everyone is inspired by something. But let's take a look at his review of the game. He does a fantastic job of getting the history of the Famicom version of which is called Dr. Jekyll's Hour of the Waking Monstrosity. Holy shit, that's a mouthful. And found the Japanese Famicom commercial for it. I'm dropping the audio out of it, but take a look here. I'll leave a link to his review below as well. Check it out. It's only like 8 minutes long, but get ready. You're going to hear a lot of the same things said about the game that you heard AVGN say about that game. And so DX is a perfect example of my problem with every reviewer on YouTube, even myself sometimes. You already know how terrible this game is, so it should come as no surprise. Wait, what? Look, I get pissed at some games like everybody does, but being mad about this shit isn't the same as having an opinion, all right? And James Rolfe's character is just one of a kind, and if you try and be the angry video game nerd, I don't know, you're going to come up short every time. The hard part about this job is finding additional ways of saying something people may already know or already believe. Get used to this trend because, damn, YouTube is a lot of folks taking one reviewer's opinion and not giving their own for the sake of people clicking on their videos. Also, horseshit, garbage, piece of shit, these are all AVGN shorthand for bad games. And you know what? After this review, I ain't going to use them anymore. I want people to know that these are my asshole opinions about video games, not someone else's asshole opinions. DX sounds like someone writing for an AVGN spoof in his review, and it's just the Cinemassacre style done without the attention paid to certain elements. It's still a great review. Dude did a lot of work, but it suffers due to not being very original. On the other hand, LJN Defender has a series called Innocent Until Proven Guilty. The LJN Defender is one of my biggest influences, and gives a review of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and fairly talks about the game, and mentions how notorious it is. Check out that review, and note, Defender accedes that it is notorious, but again, only because every review up to that point seems to agree with the Angry Video Game Nerd review. Almost 100% in style and substance agrees with what James has to say. Retro or Die does a fair review of it, but still has the tone of the aggravated reviewer. Now, 8-Bit Eric, damn, dude does a great job of giving his actual opinion of the game and keeps to the game itself. He actually plays it for you while talking about what he likes and doesn't like about the game. Check out that review as well. I'm putting all of these in the description down below. Even AVGN remarks in a video about how he's surprised that his video caused a huge resurgence of people talking about, mostly talking shit about, Jekyll and Hyde, and that it's become this cult game, not cult favorite or classic really, but he's surprised that happened.
There you go. I love the fact that this game has sort of like a cult following now. How there's like I've seen Jekyll and Hyde, like bumper stickers and like posters and magnets and like, you know.
I mean, really? Surprised? Okay, now this is a peek behind the reviewing curtain. I admit that. See, I try to review games I played and liked, but maybe I'm seeing them with more nostalgia than actual fondness for good things about the games I rented or owned as a kid. The conceit of my show is that I'm trapped like Mike Nelson, Joel Robinson, or Jonah Heston on Mystery Science Theater aboard a space station reviewing games and trying to prevent the shadowy rulers of Planet X from destroying the Earth. But the fact is, I just want to make an original review show that gives every game a fair shake, even if people already know how terrible they are. Reviewers on YouTube are hampered. They don't get any views if they don't toe a certain line when it comes to certain games. If they don't fit the algorithm of what people have already seen, they're just not going to be seen. Hence, I've only got 280 Space Pirates right now. But here's the fact about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it is a fact. There's more than just angry dismissal when it comes to Jekyll and Hyde for NES. And I'm going to show you why.
So, my reviews are different. I've said that since the beginning. I don't try to review things to make my collection go up in value. I don't pick something obscure off the rack so that people go out there and try and scurry up all the copies that they can get. That's not who I am. I also don't review things that I already have some kind of idea of that I've never played before without coming to it with an open mind. You know what I mean? I can't be that guy. I can't prejudge stuff and then come at you with a review that you're just going to watch partway through and go, oh, it's the same shit I've seen before and over and over and over again. I love the reviewers here on YouTube. They do a hard job. They have a lot of time and effort put into their reviews. I just wish that a lot of them would, I don't know, follow better examples. You know what I mean? Like follow the fact that AVGN is original rather than the fact that AVGN is doing something popular, and so I'll just do that too to get followers. I mean, Lord knows I don't know what the fuck is popular. Look at my channel. But on the other hand, the way I'm going to review this game is by the way I feel about it. How I felt when I got it. I mean, we rented a lot of games back in them days, so anytime I got a new game, but I didn't have to beat another game to play, I was always excited. And any kind of monster material, I always loved to see what they tried to do. I also try to see what they tried to do. Like, these games weren't made by people who didn't give a shit, for the most part. Some of them are cheap-ass money grabs. That Peter Pan and the Pirates, holy shit, what a turd. But other games aren't made like that. Dr. Jekyll and Hyde wasn't made to be for everybody, but it wasn't also made to be a quick cash grab or a turd, you understand? And so that's how I review things. So let's get into this actual review, and just bear in mind that I love a game that you probably heard a lot of bad things about, and they're not all false. The game has a lot of flaws. We'll talk about those too. But let's get to the part that I love, the fact that it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And maybe, just maybe, we won't get evaporated. That'll be fun, right? Nobody gets evaporated? All right, let's go.
One last thing. Before YouTube and the internet giving us our reviews of video games, it was hard. We didn't have many sources for people to give their opinions. What we had was Nintendo Power, which was basically mostly advertisements for games and strategies for games that were approved. And in other magazines, we had written articles. Now, with Jekyll and Hyde, in GamePro and Video Games and Computer Entertainment, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde had a positive review and a review that explains and understands that folks will either love or hate this game. Both reviews mention a couple things, like the cane only works on the Bs, and that the game's difficulty may be too much for some players, and that'll make you hate it right away. It also tells you how to beat the opera singer, that you need to turn into Hyde during her level to go back and grab a bag of coins to pay her off to deactivate her power. Gee, seems like angry video game nerds' gripes about the game are mostly answered in these two articles from the time they came out. Not everyone had access to magazines or the manual. My point here is to make up your own mind, of course. But understand, when you watch one of my videos, I have made up my own mind. Yeah, I've seen Angry Video Game Nerds videos. I'm a fan. And also, I live in America in the modern age, so of course I know who that is. And I'm on YouTube. But I'm also older than Jesus' freshman yearbook, so my opinions are based on my playing the game and from what I've learned about the games. And I hope to give you a fresh perspective on games that everyone knows are quote-unquote trash. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Bandai. Developed by Bandai, and the music was composed by Michiharu Hasuya. The story of the game is based on Robert Louis Stevenson's novel, with Dr. Jekyll on the way to his forthcoming wedding to Miss Millicent. The game's ending depends on which character, Jekyll or Hyde, reaches the church first. As Dr. Jekyll walks to the church with his cane, there's obstacles that obstruct his path. Denizens of the world who are aggravating Dr. Hyde. Bad singers. There's a guy setting off bombs and fireworks. There's a hunter that fires off his rifle doesn't realize that it's bothering Mr. Hyde. There's a little kid who's jealous of Mr. Hyde's upcoming marriage. Billy Pones who runs up and messes with him. There's a dog that barks at him. There's a cat that shrieks at him. There are bees. There's a giant opera singer who's annoying him as well. Now, if his stress meter fills all the way up, the Mr. Hyde personality takes over, and then it moves into Mr. Hyde's demonic world, quote-unquote, which Mr. Hyde will be shooting his Psycho Wave at monsters. And the more he hits things with the Psycho Wave, the closer to his Jekyll's de-stress meter goes. And once his anger abates, eventually he transforms back into Dr. Jekyll. If Hyde reaches the point where Jekyll was on the map in reverse, they both die. The game features 6 levels: the town, the cemetery, Town 2, the park, Cemetery 2, and the street. The North American version also removes certain sprites and segments from the original Japanese version due to Nintendo's policy of censorship. The player starts out controlling Dr. Jekyll on his way to the church, walking to the right. He takes damage from various enemies and obstacles, and his life meter decreases, and his anger meter increases. Once his life meter is fully depleted, Jekyll dies and the game is over. If his anger meter completely fills, he transforms into Mr. Hyde, day turns into night, and monsters appear. At this point, the level is mirrored horizontally, and Mr. Hyde walks from right to left and has to kill monsters as fast as he can with the Psycho Wave. It has to be the Psycho Wave. You kill them any other way, you don't get points towards your Jekyll meter. Certain monsters give more meter refill when you use your Psycho Wave on them. And once the player returns as Dr. Jekyll, he gets 70% of his life meter back. If Hyde reaches a spot equivalent to where Jekyll was, the powers that be strike them both with lightning and kill them instantly. Therefore, the objective of the game is to advance as far as possible as Dr. Jekyll and transform back as soon as possible as Mr. Hyde. However, the more detailed alternative ending of the game requires the player to strategically reach the church with Mr. Hyde, but making sure Dr. Jekyll stays ahead of him until the final level, where he finally gets to marry his lady love. Or does he? Dun dun dun! No, he does. He gets to marry her both ways. Both endings are identical. You just get a bit more what happens next with the good ending.
So, for its nostalgic value to me, and for the fact that you might have overlooked this game because you heard a bad rap about a game that not everyone agrees with, and I've shown you proof, it's me. And the magazines of the era. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. For me, and maybe for you, it gets a license to play. And...
Attention Commander, the hosts from Planet X have been watching the feed live and will send a message about the fate of the Earth shortly. Commander, if the Earth and the retro station are to be evaporated, it has not been a million years.
10-4. Alright. It's go time. This cartridge, it contains a lot of hard things, like the action's difficult. The not having a manual will set you back a little bit because you're just not going to be prepared for all the crap in the game, to be honest with you. And my suggestion to you is to find a copy of the PDF of the manual. I'll put a link down below to vim.net. They do a thing called the NES Vault, and it's just it's the manual project that they have, and they just scan in manuals. You can download them PDF. They ask for a donation. Also, retromags.com, which is an archive of old video gaming magazines like Game Pro and Video Games and Computer Entertainment, which is where I got the reviews for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, showing that it's not a bad game. I mean, damn. I mean,
Yes.
Station Commander, the host believes the Earth is no threat, but to be 100% certain, we require you to continue reviewing the messages sent into space. You will be compensated for your time by not being evaporated.
All right. Well, hell. All right. All right, folks. If I got to be up here forever reviewing these games for you and for them, then the next game we do is going to be one of my favorite games. I'll give you a little hint. Since we're halfway to Halloween, baby, and this is the month that the Retro Station and myself are celebrating a birthday, opening of Season 2, License to Play, it's going to be my favorite game on the NES. Literally. It's Final Fantasy? Nope. No. Double Dragon? Super Mario Bros. 3? It's good. I love that game. But this game is my favorite game. So, we'll see you guys in a week. Remember to always brush your teeth, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, do your workouts, get crazy, play some games you heard that were bad. You never know. You might actually like them too. But most of all, remember to stay retro. Peace.